renounce those desires, then his activities fall away and he enjoys peace of soul. But work without any selfish motive is good. It does not create any worry. But it is very difficult to be totally unselfish. We may think that our work is selfless, but selfishness comes unknown to us from no one knows where. But if a man has already undergone great spiritual discipline, then as a result of it, he may be able to do work without any selfish motive. After the vision of God, a man can easily do unselfish work. In most cases, action drops away after the attainment of God. Only a few, like Narada, work to bring light to mankind. And the Avadut accepted a bee as another teacher. Bees accumulate their honey by days of hard labor, but they cannot enjoy their honey, for a man soon breaks the comb and takes it away. The Avadut learned this lesson from the bees, that one should not lay things up. Sadhus should depend 100% on God. They must not gather for the morrow. But this does not apply to the householder. He must bring up his family, therefore it is necessary for him to provide. Birds and monks do not hoard, yet birds also hoard after their chicks are hatched. They collect food in their beaks for their young ones. Let me tell you one thing, Vijay. Don't trust a sadhu if he keeps a bag and baggage with him and a bundle of clothes with many knots. I have seen such sadhus under the banyan tree in Panchavati. 2 or 3 of them were seated there. One was picking over lentils, some were sewing their clothes, and all were gossiping about a feast that they had enjoyed in a rich man's house. They said among themselves, "The rich man spent 100,000 rupees on the feast and fed the sadhus sumptuously with cakes and sweets and many delicious things." All laughed. Vijay, it is true, sir, I have seen such sadhus at Gaya. They are called the Ladwala sadhus of Gaya. Master to Vijay. When love of God is awakened, work drops away of itself. If God makes some men work, let them work. It is now time for you to give up everything. Renounce all and say, "O mind, may you and I alone behold the Mother, letting no one else intrude." Saying this, Sri Ramakrishna began to sing in his soul-enthralling voice. "Cherish my precious Mother Syama, tender within, O mind. May you and I alone behold her, letting no one else intrude. O mind, in solitude, enjoy her, keeping your passions all outside. Take but the tongue, that now and again it may cry out, O Mother, Mother. Suffer no breath of base desire to enter and approach us there, but bid true knowledge stand on guard, alert and watchful evermore."
Om Maharan Maye Pare Koshe Virajan Brahmanishkalam Tachu Brahm Jyoti Sham Jyoti Tadyadatma Vidho Vidhu. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, free of all taint, the essence of everything which all beings seek, unconsciously or consciously. There shines Brahman. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Satyena, Om Satyena labhyastapassa yesatma samyagyanena brahmacharyena nityam antaha sharirehi jyotirmayo hi shubraha yam pashanti atayaha kshina doshaha Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self, within all beings and all things, is realized by knowledge, by moderation, by austerity, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it naturally, everywhere, in everything, existing in everyone, even here in this very mind and body. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Yes, come in. People are still arriving in our little ashram here in Portland, Oregon. And people are watching live stream from the San Francisco ashram and from the Hawaii ashram and from East Coast and from India as we use this new technology to bring everything into the present moment. Everything is live all the time. It's just that our consciousness sometimes vacates that position and thinks of the past or thinks of the future, or maybe even dwells in the present, which is not necessarily the eternal moment. They call past, present, and future the three phases of time. So it's the eternal moment is something completely different, or as the Upanishads state, completely other. And we should consider that, but whatever the case may be, you have arrived here, live or not live, hopefully alive, to the final class on Vedanta here in Portland, Oregon. After some 5 classes in over the last 3 weeks in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and also some 6, maybe 7 classes on our Zen retreat along the Wind River last weekend, where we were not live streaming. So these great teachings of Lord Buddha and of the other ancient Indian seers must be kept with us day to day, even minute to minute, and favored and cherished as the jnana wisdom that is satisfying. That is, all other knowledge satisfies only for a little while, but this wisdom puts to death ignorance and therefore makes one content. When one's content, one can reach for the peace that passes all understanding, and from that one can get non-dual abidance and bliss, Ananda they call it, where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both, as Swami Vivekananda has put it in his beautiful Song of the Sannyasin, which many of you have memorized. So in this particular Sunday, we want to finish up chapter 5 of Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Yesterday we went through some 4 or 5 slokas, all having to do with rebirth and reincarnation. And that's a bit of a departure for the Upanishads. This is Shvetashvatara was more current. When we say more current, still many centuries before Christ, but more current as the Upanishads go. So his teachings were more to the yuga or age that people found themselves in at the time, and therefore many questions were coming up around the reincarnation process, which has been there in India since time immemorial. It's started on a great premise called ajati, no birth, no death. And that's why we often sing, and we might as well start off with some musical notes too. Shankara sings in just after Christ's time, about 600, 700 years. Namrichor na shanka, namijati beda, pita naiva me naiva, mata majanmaha. And he goes on, Chirananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. Namrichorna Shanka Name Jati Beda. I never die. I have no death because I was never born. How can the unborn ever die? He says, I have no father, no mother. Not even a birth have I. I am pure consciousness, absolute. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. So that is the 5th verse of the Nirvana Shatkam, 6 verses on Nirvana that Shankara wrote when he was a young boy, but he was a young boy all his life. He passed away at 32, so he never experienced old age and disease and so forth, as many of the yogis choose to do. They want to bring everything into that present moment, as we were just saying, and make all years, how many years they might live, pregnant with the non-dual wisdom that is the realization. It is the level of their consciousness that they dwell at. They don't have any default zones. They don't fall back on comforts, or definitely not on ignorance or evils, but even on comforts or pleasures and the pain that accompanies those. They tend to stay in non-dual samadhi, and when they have to come down, as Sri Ramakrishna said, the bird may fly high, but it has to come to rest sometime on a branch. Then they come down to this non-dual wisdom and go on teaching it. Like underwater wood, preaching profound words, as one Zen koan says. So Shankara, will look at some of his teachings today, and of course he was the great commentator on these Upanishads. There are 108 of them, and about 11 of them he commented on in his brief 32 years, and so he made them, sort of put his stamp of authority on them, as he was a great non-dualist. His teacher's teacher had written the great non-dual Karika on the Mandukya Upanishad, and which impressed everyone, East and West, with its teachings on Om, A-U-M, as we just chanted at the end of this beautiful song, this beautiful verse. So birthlessness and deathlessness of all things has been there in India, and the apparent passing of the body has been seen, as we said yesterday, like waves rising on an ocean and falling on an ocean. Many, many waves coming. Millions of waves, too many to count. In fact, if you do count them, you miss the meaning of life. It scoots right by you. instead of being water. Have to consider wave and consider ocean, no doubt, but be water. Be that essence that flows malleable, and takes forms and gives up forms without ever going through the illusion of birth or the illusion of death. Those are precious teachings to all followers of the Dharma. And as I said, whether they be Buddha Dharma or Vedanta Dharma or Yoga Dharma or Samkhya Dharma or Tantra Dharma or any other Dharma, they all seem to echo the same great truths. And those truths we want to keep with us. So here in this final class here in Portland until July, end of July when I return, we will finish up chapter 5 and hopefully break into chapter 6. Now, I think it would be advisable if we read all of chapter 5. There were two great subjects, and that will only take 2 minutes, because the Upanishads, really, most of them are an easy study. I mean, they are essential wisdom, and you can take a sentence of them and take them inside and unwrap them. They're very powerful. Like my teacher used to say, if you split an atom, then you release a great power for destruction. But if you split the atom of teachings, the Jnana Matra, they had words for it thousands of years before Christ and 4,000 or 5,000 years before the electron microscope. You split that atom of knowledge inside of you, and that implodes with benefit for all of humanity. It doesn't explode with potential dangers for humanity. So each sentence, maybe even each word, matra, like the word Om, can be taken in and taken apart by syllable, and you meditate on the A and the U and the M, and you find out that those connect with creation, preservation, and destruction, and projection, sustenance, and withdrawal, and your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states, and your in-breath, and your hell-breath, and your out-breath, and you start making all these connections to the great word, which was in the beginning as an origin, leaving God originless, by the way. No birth, no death, as Shankara just sang. And then it starts to make sense, those inner contemplations make sense out of everything external, and you walk around, as we just recited, Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha, the Siddhanta or conclusion of Vedanta is that all this is Brahman. But at first, man is seeing it all as a prison house of suffering. And then he sees it all, gets a little knowledge, and sees it as Maya. And he has to renounce it. And then later stage, he sees it all as his own intelligence, made manifest. Chairs, pillows, rugs, houses are all forms of his own mind. They all came out of the dream state, out of the thinking process, and solidified here. And then tonight in deep sleep, he'll dissolve them again, and bring them forth and dissolve them. And this is going on in cycles. So he begins to see everything as his own wisdom. Then that great soul, man or woman, beyond gender, as the Upanishads told us in chapter 5, sees everything as Brahman, and that's the definitive state. That's the culminative state, called enlightenment or moksha or mukti, freedom. Freedom that never had ignorance or bondage in it in the first place. That was gone swiftly as soon as one awoken, as if it were just some dream one had and can't even remember, sort of like we can't remember what it was like to be in preschool. See? And most beings forget right away what ignorance is like, as if it never existed, because guess what? Resist not evil. It doesn't exist. You have brought it into existence with your own thinking process, and therefore we chant, may our thinking process be purified. And then may our minds never dip into such nonsense anymore. We always stay at this one level, which is itself its own default zone, called higher wisdom, or jnana, or Atma Gyan, as we learned from Lord Vashishta yesterday, Atma Gyan, the knowledge of the self, in which all other problems and sophisms dissolve, as Milarepa sings in his great songs in Tibet. So let's read chapter 5 straight through. I'll try my best not to make any comments. That will be my challenge. But as I was saying, two great things you'll note. First is the personal God and the impersonal God. They go back and forth as if the two are the same. They might as well be. But you'll hear the Upanishad, which is non-dual, talking about the personal God and attributing creation and all of those things to it. and then keeping this one impersonal God completely acreate. It doesn't move, it doesn't think, it's pure and perfect, it has no connection with anything here except as its underlying substratum, as Samkhya says. That's one thing you'll notice, personal, impersonal God posed against each other. And then the second thing you'll notice is these last 5 slokas we studied yesterday about the rebirth process. A relative law, karma and rebirth, that Dalai Lama, who is just here in Portland, has said that we must look into in the West if we want to solve our problems at the emotional and intellectual and spiritual levels. We must look into that relative truth and contemplate it so we get outside of this one lifetime scenario, and the death grasp on the changing particle, as if it were somehow real, and we see that it's changing at a billionth of a second. And Christ said, "You built your house on sand. You should build your house on bedrock." So it sounds like sand is shifting particles to me. Science has finally found them and found the emptiness and everything. Shunyata, emptiness. So those 2 things watch out for as I read these, maybe, what is it, 13 slokas straight down. Ignorance leads to the perishable. Wisdom leads to immortality. Entirely different from both of these is that one, the imperishable infinite, the secret, the supreme Brahman, in whom exists wisdom as well as ignorance, and who governs them both. That Brahman alone presides over all of nature and the aspects, and controls every form and every cause of production. It witnesses the birth of the firstborn seer of golden color, and nourishes that one with wisdom, differentiating each genus into its species, and each species into its members. The Supreme Being withdraws them once more into their own ground. Again, bringing forth the agents of creation, the Great Self holds sway over them all. Just as the sun shines, lighting up all space above, below, and across, even so does the one adorable God, the repository of all goodness and greatness, preside over everything that has a nature of a cause. That one who is the one source of the world brings out everything from its own nature, and leads creatures to perfection according to their deserts, and endows each being with its distinguishing characteristics. Thus it presides over the whole universe. It lies hidden in the Upanishads, which form the essence of the Vedas. That one, the Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg, knows as the source of himself and of the Vedas. Those gods and seers who realized this one in former days became identified with it and verily became immortal. Only he who gets attached to pleasurable qualities of things does work for the sake of its fruits, and enjoys the fruits of his own deeds. Though really the master of the senses, he becomes bound by them, and assuming various forms, wanders about through the 3 paths as a result of his own deeds. Subtle as the point of a goad, and pure, effulgent, and infinite like the sun, that one is seen alone as assuming the form of another, as the size of a thumb near the heart, on account of the finiteness of the heart in which it appears, and associating itself with the ego and with sankalpa, mental projection, on account of the limitations of the intellect in which it inhabits. That individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint, divided and subdivided hundreds of times, yet it is potentially infinite. It has to be known. It is neither female nor male nor neuter. Whatever body it assumes, it becomes identified with that. By desire, contact, sight, and delusion, the embodied soul assumes successfully various forms in various places according to its deeds, just as the body grows nourished by showers of food and drink. The embodied self chooses many forms, gross and subtle, based on the qualities belonging to himself, to the actions and to the mind. The cause of their combination is found to be still another. Realizing that one who is without beginning and end, who assumes the cosmos in the midst of chaos, who assumes many forms, and who alone envelops everything, one becomes free from all fetters. That supreme divinity who created both life and matter, who is the source of all arts and sciences, who can be intuited by a pure and devoted mind, realizing that one, the blissful and incorporeal and the nameless, one is freed from further embodiment. End of chapter 5. Om, peace, peace, peace. So with that brief 2 minutes of reading, we see those two main subjects, the personal and the impersonal God, and then taking up the subject of how the soul gets embodied, becomes identified with senses, sense objects, and the pleasures and pain that rise from that contact. Like the father of yoga said, the seer has become identified with the seen, and also how it gives it up. Hopefully one can not just detach, but eventually learn the art of attachment and detachment both at will. Detachment would be when one finds out one's bound. And then when one frees oneself from all attachments, then one realizes that one is still in the body, and one will have to associate with forms still, like with the ego, a very subtle form. So it will begin to associate and disassociate at will, attach and detach, and that way it will remain free among objects and bodies and sense objects. And it will move about the world as a ghost or a ghoul or an inert thing, as Sri Ramakrishna says. It is move amongst the objects of the senses without becoming attached to the objects of the senses. So those are teachings we know that come from Vedanta and Yoga and Buddhism very succinctly. Now, before we plunge into chapter 6, let's take that last sloka, which we didn't look at very deeply yesterday. We see that the Supreme Divinity created both life and matter and is the source of all arts and sciences. It can be intuited by a pure and devoted mind. And the process of this realization frees one from further embodiment. So yesterday we looked at all the 3 or 4 charts on embodiment. 2 by Lord Vashishta. One happens to be the release of the mind from bondage, because we know it's the mind that gets bound, not the soul. The soul is ever free. And that's a nice distinction to make in the Vedanta too, as compared to some fundamentalist and dualistic philosophies or ideologies that we may have been raised in our culture. So to know the difference is very important there. And so with this process of evolving, although from a non-dual standpoint we say the soul doesn't evolve, then any kind of progression or growth or transformation that may be made, if there is such a thing, Vivekananda says, is made in the mind. It's the mind that evolves and devolves, and therefore if one controls and masters the mind, one controls and masters life. And of course the senses follow along like 5 little puppies, or like 5 white horses, as this picture ought to show us. So each horse being a sense, seeing, tasting, hearing, touching, smelling, all connected with air, earth, fire, water, and ether. That is, as you know, earth with smell, water with taste, sight with fire, air with feeling or touch, and ether with hearing. You have to connect the 5 senses to their 5 elements and therefore have a foundation for yoga. Otherwise everything becomes scattered and fragmented, and each horse wants to take its own path, and the carriage, or the chariot as we might say in those days, is split apart. So with that reins under your control, the prana, it is the life force, you draw in the senses from their objects and turn that prana inside and find the great will, Arjuna, sitting in the chariot, destroying all enemies, removing all obstacles, and then you find Krishna in the same chariot with him. That would be the soul, the Purusha. So with a great Gita metaphor, we find out that these great thoughts have been considered from time out of mind. So the 2 newest charts in this collection of some 275 charts to date, which are visuals I've created so that we can hear audible and visual and put them together, just like we put together air with touch and ether with hearing, we also have to put together sight with sound, and those two make a very powerful combination. So you see here then two charts which I've formulated that will help us in seeing the soul's, the mind soul, that is, its evolution. The simplest one here is on your right, and it has to do with stages that are very well measured. This one here has to do with a more gradual process that shows how the mind actually purifies itself over time. So, phases of the soul and relativity. The first quote up there by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is, "The jiva at first remains in a state of ignorance. It is not conscious of God, but of matter and of multiplicity. It only notices the many things around it. Upon attaining knowledge, it becomes conscious that God dwells in all beings and all things. But upon attaining higher wisdom, it discards both knowledge and ignorance and talks of nothing but God day and night." Which is what we found Sri Ramakrishna doing all the time. And therefore we would sing to him songs like this. Parama Guru Siddha Yogi, Parama Guru Siddha Yogi, Matri Bhakta Yuga Avatar, Paramahamsa Shri Ramakrishna, Paramahamsa Shri Ramakrishna, Laho Pranam Namaskar. So, O great teacher, illumined yogi, devotee of the Divine Mother, Matri Bhakta, and avatar of the age, Yuga Avatar, O Supreme Soul of my soul, accept my prostrations and accept my salutations. That is the Kali Avatar, coming with Sri Sharda Devi, the Holy Mother, who's my teacher's teacher, who taught here in Portland for so many decades, and connected all the way back with the eternal Rama and Krishna, who is Sri Ramakrishna, and also brought Swami Vivekananda to this world, and brought him also to America in 1893, so these teachings could be proliferated here. And we would come to know the Upanishads. When he got here, he wrote back to his brother monks, "Send Panini's grammar on Sanskrit. Send over the Gita, send over copies of the Upanishads, send over the Panchadasi." He wanted all these ancient scriptures of India to be put into English, and so that we could read them, we could lift ourselves out of ignorance and the suffering that it caused. Ignorance of what? Of our true nature, as being eternal and perfect, because we had been raised to think we were sinners and we would go to hell and so forth like that. But when Sri Ramakrishna first heard the Bible read to him, he said, stop, after a few paragraphs. It speaks only of sin. A man should never think of sin. A man should always think of his pure and perfect nature. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. See? Thou art Shiva, thou art Shakti. That is, the men are Shiva, the women are Shakti. So that perfect dynamic power and that perfect immovable, stable reality is there at the foundation of our very being. So he says then, upon attaining knowledge, one becomes conscious of God. Then one, as Krishna says in the Gita, go beyond knowledge to truth. So you take a thorn out of your flesh with another thorn. Thorn of ignorance gets removed with the thorn of knowledge, and then you throw both thorns away because you're free and you are then poised in the truth itself, non-dual, indivisible truth. And there's where you intend and prefer to stay. Now, you can see by this chart that the soul has some finagling to do in order to convince itself of its own perfection. What a conundrum, you see. We've fallen into the whole universe is mind made manifest, and then we come out into the things we projected, and then we lose them, and then we get upset because we think we've lost them when they all exist inside of us all the time. That's sort of a nutshell conundrum that mankind finds itself in at this period, in the Kali Yuga. So if you start with this chart near the bottom, you can see pasu, animalistic. Tantra says there are three kinds of beings: animalistic, heroic, and divine. That's pasu, virya, and daiva. So many beings, you might have noticed if you mix with humanity, are still at an animalistic level. They're still only at the level of the gross senses, or as Sri Ramakrishna called it, the three lower chakras. The one in the middle has three lower, three below, and three above. So at the heart is where we intend to stay if we're devotees of God, and the truth and the word are both clear to us there. But if we fall into the lower centers, then eating, drinking, and sex life become our only preoccupation, matter and material, and therefore we cut ourselves out of all the beautiful, blissful, peaceful, compassionate, loving, kind, wise characteristics which are in our own soul. See, we just shut the door on them, when we should be shutting the door on lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, fear, remorse, grief, pride of caste, pride of lineage, anger. Those things we should shut the door on. Shut the gate of the mind and just concentrate on that one divine reality. So animalistic is where many people begin if they have forgotten in a previous lifetime their connection with divinity. If they haven't forgotten, then they're born again with good qualities. And they have an opportunity to rise beyond good qualities into a transcendent level, beyond both good and bad, because good is a gold chain, and iron is and bad is an iron chain. So we want to get beyond all chains, snap thy fetters, and strike off thy fetters, so we can rise to that transcendent position and live in oneness. So from animalistic, you can see, is gross, and ignorance is a part of it. And then you see souls moving out of the animalistic to the worldly, which is more primal. Some of them discover there's a life force. Man does not live by bread alone, Jesus said. So they realize there's something beyond matter and food, and they begin to intuit that life force that's running through everything. And they get rather addicted to it. In fact, it is the greatest addiction of all addictions. People drink alcohol and take drugs and have many encounters physically and so forth and so on, simply because they get addicted to life force, but they haven't put their thumb on the actual force itself. So they're thinking in their worldliness, I'm supposed to breathe, so they breathe, see, and they waken up this prana, this mukhya prana for health. And they try and make themselves healthy bodies, but they still haven't realized that they're not the body. So, and the life force too has its waxing and its waning phases. See, it comes and it goes. Sometimes I feel energetic, sometimes I feel lazy, sometimes I feel restless. So they still haven't controlled the prana. They watch the breath, which is a very rudimentary way of stilling heartbeat and mind, but then they really don't see the prana that is causing the lungs to breathe. They mistake the lungs themselves or the breath itself for prana. But prana is something free and coursing. So it's always coursing through the system from the lowest chakra to the penultimate chakra. It courses. So one has to get a hold of that prana like a great Garuda bird and ride it wherever it wants, because it's what takes you into dreaming state tonight. That prana also takes you out of the body at death, brings you back into the body at birth. So this prana is a key and missing bit of knowledge in our Western culture right now. We have to become aware of that. Then there's a sort of primal awakening, you see. Then finally, then intelligence comes. We see the great intellectuals and the thinkers. They start, we just said here, that supreme divinity is the source of all arts and sciences. So all those sciences which the intellectuals have focused upon, they're really seeing the effect of that in arts and science, but they don't know the mother of all arts and sciences. We would call her Saraswati, or Sharda is another name for Saraswati, ancient Vedic goddess that is the mother of all wisdom. That's why she holds the veena and plays it, because she's master of music, and she has the book in one of her four hands, and that's the scripture, so she's master of the scriptures. She's master of the mantras, which people use to calm their minds and to get purification. And that's why she holds the beads in the other hand. You see, she's saying the mantra all the time. Every time a bead goes by, she's twirling it, so that all the worlds spin because of her presence, her underlying presence in everything. And so those three aspects specify her, or indicate her as the mother of all arts and sciences. So when they reach the intellectual level, the vital level, they have awakened to mother without knowing it still. There, one finally reaches the ethereal, that is the religious level. So one moves from animalistic to ignorant, from ignorant to worldly, from worldly to intelligent, from intelligent to religious. That's where heart and mind have to come together. If you leave the heart alone, it deteriorates into emotionalism, sentimentalism. Big problem for us right now in the West. Getting all bent out of shape about every little thing, when it's really your own projection. But if you leave the intellect, as these people prove to us, you leave the intellect without faith, without heart, then it becomes dry and secular and sterile. See, it doesn't live. So put heart and mind together, and you have that beautiful word in Sanskrit, Medha Kendra. See, the intelligence of the heart. And it informs everything. That is, the intelligence saves faith from getting too sentimental, and faith saves intelligence from getting too sterile. And then you have the two wings of the bird, my teacher used to say, and the bird can finally get off the ground. So when the religious comes along, if the intelligence has been there, it's a great combination, and we have people who are beginning to coalesce two of the four yogas. Now they just have to meditate. And that third yoga will be there, and they'll be able to benefit from the blending of bhakti and jnanam, wisdom and devotion. Then after they meditate well, they need to come back full circle and serve God and all beings. That's karma yoga. So usually it follows, and this is what this is saying, is that one gets rid of one's ignorance first with knowledge, and then knowledge must be transcended to get spiritually awakened when you put the two together. Get rid of that thorn of ignorance in your flesh with the thorn of knowledge, and then go beyond both dualities and all other dualities as well. So that religious level is a rather ethereal level. It's possible people will fall victim to various lures and seductions there at that level. Occult powers are one of them. They start getting into metaphysics and dabbling with the occult, and therefore it doesn't amount to true religion. It just amounts to playing with the prana. Sri Ramakrishna called all of that the tricks of the prana. Can cause illusions and manifest things out of thin air. You can walk on water, various things like that. You've controlled the prana, and you get into the tricks of prana, but you are not using the prana to go further inward into this heart of all things, you see. So one needs to use that prana to get to enlightenment, and that's what happens next. The spiritual awakening happens rather at the celestial level, and awakening isn't the final end of all things, for sure, because people can get awakened and then fall back to sleep. You might have noticed, you might have done that this morning. Awakened and fell back to sleep. Well, it's the same with with spiritual knowledge. It comes and then you don't take advantage of it, and you don't follow through. Follow through is very important. You must hear the truth, Shruti, but you can't stop there and walk away from the teacher and the teachings and the Dharma and the spiritual path and say, okay, I heard it. But you have to, Shruti, Manana, roll it over and over in your mind. Come back again and hear it many times, because you'll hear it differently each day. And one of those times you hear it will be the time you really need to hear it. At that particular point, any given teaching will make the greatest sense to you, and you'll have a flash of spiritual awakening. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, even the worldly beings back here at this level have flashes of spiritual awakening occasionally, but their case is like a lotus. A blue lotus is a rare lotus and it opens in the sun, but when a cloud passes in front of the sun, it can't bear it, see, and it closes again. So the realizations of worldly people pass that quickly. They'll be enjoying a particularly deep dream, or something will come to them in the form of good merit or good karma, or the gunas will be in abeyance and everything will be proper and ready, sunlit, and they'll be enjoying a few minutes or a few hours of that, and the phone will ring and you're fired. And they lose that bliss again, you see. So that blue lotus can't bear to stay open in the midst of trials and circumstances of life that are always changing. So then the challenge comes. I must stay even, stiti pragnasya, as Krishna calls it in the Gita. I must stay in full awareness of this knowledge. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to hear that knowledge again and again, even if it bores me to tears. Because on a particular day, it will awaken me. So that very same thing I heard that bored me will awaken me. So repetition is really the spice of spiritual practice. And it's not just the same thing you'd hear on a particular day, but that same thing put in a different way, coming from a different direction. As like 108 Upanishads would bring you same topics, only from different directions, had by different teachers, those realizations. Like in Zen, last week we were talking about, they say you must stay away from wild fox Zen. Wild fox Zen means you're running after different paths and different teachers and never settling on one. So you may be going to two perfectly good teachers and each of them may be realized, but they each have a different personality and they're each teaching in their own way, and that's going to mean confusion for you when you hear the teachings contradict each other. So you must stay with that one Roshi or that one teacher whom you've settled on and get the essence, like digging one deep well, and then find water. And at that point, you can decide to build bridges between paths, between teachers, even between religions, like Sri Ramakrishna did. But first, he had his realization of Mother Kali. Our own founder, Lex Hixon, had his realization of Advaita Vedanta by writing his discourse and his dissertation on Gaudapada's non-dual karika that I mentioned earlier. After studying 7 years with Swami Nikhilananda, who is one of Holy Mother's direct disciples who came to the West. So with that, he was able to realize Advaita Vedanta, and with that as a platform, he could get into Tibetan Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, and he became a Sufi sheikh with the Jarahi order. He used to say, I've taken hand or joint citizenship in 4 or 5 different religious traditions of the world. I hold joint citizenship. He could only do that by, and I saw him do this through his life, by putting all others aside and concentrating on that one and not mixing them, and then getting the essence out of that and going forward. So we have to be careful of this wild fox Zen tendency, or we call it in our culture, and we're well used to it now, spiritual menu tasting. Yes, dating a little bit at first, you see, before marriage. Dating is usually said, you can do that, yes. Find out what's out there in the field. But once you find out, you must make a conclusion, a great conclusion, Vedanta Siddhanta, and once you do that, then you can get deep into any given path that you choose. So this is all happening at a spiritually awakened level. you see Shiva handing the great arrow to Ram, and this will make him into a spiritual practitioner. He's heading away from just the spiritual awakening to the realization of the cosmos, the realization of the 24 cosmic principles within him, from the great mind Mahat on down the Trinity, on down to the first inception of individuality called the ego, down into the intellect or intelligence, to the mind and its thoughts, trickling down further into the subtle elements and the subtle senses that you haven't dreamed tonight, and then coming out full cycle all the way out to the gross senses and the gross elements you see here, all in various combinations. Each object is a combination of 5 elements, and in different degrees, different admixtures. So it's a kind of inner science rather than just chemistry or what you encountered back here in the worldly and the intelligent level. Now you're beginning to encounter those same things at a subtle level, and you're beginning to understand them. So you're beginning to understand Srishti Rahasya, the secret of all creation, what we would call projectionism, and how everything is a manifestation of the mind. That, as Holy Mother said, your objects here are just thought made concretized. Everything is turned into a solid form by the power of your coming from your thoughts. Or if you want to put it simply, first there's the inventor and then the invention comes forth. So you are that which has fashioned the worlds. Don't blame God for that. It's not my fault, God would say. As my computer sometimes says at 2 a.m. So spiritual awakening has to lead to practice. Another way of saying that is you've got these 9 levels of desire. Sometimes we put that chart up. 9 ways of desire, and there are 3 ways which you cannot satisfy desire, and there are 6 ways which you can. And it all really impinges on the Dharma. That is, as soon as you take refuge in a higher reality, then your ego is given away, and it's not going to cling, selfish grasping, we said yesterday. It's not going to cling to things anymore, and it can begin to let go and let God, as they're saying in Christian circles nowadays. Or we would say, hand everything over to the will of the Divine Mother. Shakale tomari icha mai karatumi. Tomar karma, tumi karma. That's the beautiful song that Sri Ramakrishna used to sing. Oh, everything happens by thy own sweet will, O Mother. All work belongs to you, others only call it their own. So when you find that Divine Mother dwelling deep inside of you, you hand everything over to her and surrender. That's the Bhakti, faith way of proceeding. But the Jnani, the wisdom seeker, has to do the same with his knowledge. It gathers all this wisdom, and it's there inside of him. What do I do with it? What do I do with it? It fills the intellect, and the intellect becomes so full, it's dangerous calling it my knowledge. And intelligence is different than the intellect. The intellect's the container, intelligence what gets poured into it. And hopefully you've refined that intelligence so that it's pure. So they call that the 3 kinds of liberation. One of them is through knowledge. The intellect gets so full that it bursts. And that means that you have to hand it all over to the wisdom mother from which it came. And then you can also follow detachment. You detach like the monks. You detach so much that pretty soon you encounter emptiness. It's like going the opposite direction than fullness. And you get so empty, you see, that the ego disappears. The other way, you get so full the ego bursts. So that's a good way to proceed. Neti neti, we call it in Vedanta, or shunyata in Buddhism. So whatever the case may be, that's what's happening here at the level of the spiritual practitioner and the spiritually awakened. Between the celestial and the cosmic, and these words, gross, primal, vital, ethereal, celestial, cosmic, divine, universal, and superconscious, are all levels of consciousness where many, many thousands and billions of beings abide. That's, of course, your gross world, and that's lower heaven, and that's higher heaven. You see, and then finally comes the Maharloka and Janaloka, the realms of the seers and saints, and finally you find the realm of the Trinity, you see, and then finally you get into a realm of the Word, and finally you find Brahman. So these might as well be chakras, the lower three, the middle, and the higher three, or they might as well be akashas, different kinds of space. And they can also be levels of realization, and they can also be worlds. Lokas, they're called. So we've looked at all of those in many ways through our SRV 20 years. Happy birthday to SRV, because this is its 20th year of operations. And it falls on the 150th year of Swami Vivekananda's birth that the world is celebrating around. We saw that going on in India recently, and I also saw posters of him in the Haight in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. So his appearance is everywhere, his reappearance, we should say. So with that much of presence of a great being in the world mind, plus what he brought to the West since 1893, that should be enough to awaken us at least. And then we need to move on to practice. So first it's, if you want to put it in another way, first it's worldliness. It moves on to morality. Person finally gets tired of being hedonistic or sensualistic or materialistic and dealing with evil and so forth, dealing with his own passions and fetters, moves on to morality and ethics, gets caught there for a while, and moves on to Dharma. That's these wisdom traditions. And from Dharma, contemplates properly and rightly and for the right amount of time, and moves on to sadhana. That's practice. So that's what the level you are here, a practitioner. It's really knowing what everything is inside of you, the cosmos. And finally, the spiritual adept emerges. See, from spiritual practitioner, the spiritual adept happens, and he's reached the divine status. So here's pasu, animalistic, and then when you're here, you're virya. You're like Hanuman. You're the spiritual hero, the spiritual giant. And what that really means is that your compassion has become so broad, and you want to watch over all beings. You're not concerned with yourself anymore. You want loka sangraha. Krishna said in the Gita, Arjuna asked him, and he said, I've attained everything already, Arjuna. There's nothing more for me to attain. I don't need to embody anymore. But I need to come back and show people how to find the truth. I'm interested in loka sangraha. Means the highest good for all the lokas, all the worlds. Everyone in all the worlds, not just humans. Celestials are stuck, the ancestors are stuck, gods and goddesses are stuck for a very long time in their particular positions. And they all need guidance, and they all need this great avatar, which is up here, to inform them time to time. You see, in the same way humanity forgets about truth and falls into ignorance and has to be reminded. It's the same with the ancestors and the celestials and even the gods. You might have seen and read in some of the Itihasa and Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and other collections of stories how the gods fall out of knowledge of themselves and start warring with the demigods. And they cause great mischief. They don't act any different than humans. They have just as many wars and problems. They're just a little bit more amenable to higher suggestion, and they get over themselves and cause peace and harmony to flourish again. Well, humans do that in periods too, but the higher understanding doesn't come and dwell in them for all time. The human condition is always remembering, forgetting, remembering, forgetting. It might be one of the greater dualities to contemplate on, remembrance and forgetfulness, so that you can follow through and make a final difference to your life, and therefore begin to help others. So that idea of loka sangraha is there, the highest good for all beings. When you give up thinking about yourself, then, as Milarepa says, the only thought is to give, never to take. And that's that level of divine spiritual adept. And if one engages in that long enough, one becomes a spiritual master and reaches the universal level. A spiritual master and also a past master. A past master is one of those beings we look at and say, well, God must be unjust, because they were born perfect and I'm born with so many flaws. So we're blaming God for something that we actually projected upon ourselves, as I said. So those beings, even these beings who awaken suddenly, you see, they have this spiritual awakening. They've been practicing sadhana for lifetimes. You just happen to see the fruits of their sadhana come back to them in that particular lifetime that you were with them, and you see them awaken. And so it looks like they didn't do any work. Sri Ramakrishna had a story about that. He said, man and his a son of a man and his friend went over to his father's house, and they sat down, and they all decided to have just a little bit of libation, you see. One little tiny tumbler of wine, you see. So they all saluted and drank that bit of wine, and the boy's friend, the son's friend, got completely intoxicated by that and started swearing and cussing and insulting people. And the father looked at his son and said, what's this, just a little tiny bit of wine? And he's acting like that? And the son said, he's been drinking all night. So Sri Ramakrishna, using a negative teaching in a positive way, these people who have been drinking all night, people who have been practicing sadhana for lifetimes, and all of a sudden they start swearing the scriptures at you, and talking all the time, insulting your ego, and just with one little taste of the truth coming to them in that particular life. So they're ready to awaken. They're poised on the brink of awakening. So they act as great examples for us to prepare ourselves. Qualification is king. Qualification is king, to prepare oneself. Now, so that's the spiritual masters and the past masters. Out of the rank of this trinity in the avatars and the Nityasiddhas are eternally perfect souls, like Vivekananda was said to be a Nityasiddha by his master. Avatars, of course, Rama, Krishna, Christ, Buddha, all those great souls. Whether they be called prophets or messengers, or whether they be called avatars, are these purely realized souls who come back of their own will, out of compassion, or for some great purpose, to be about their Father's business, as Christ said, to help others. It's this idea of loka sangraha in their mind. So out of these ranks are drawn the past masters. They come and come again. And their disciples are the spiritual masters and spiritual adepts. So, put it in this way, here's a quote from the Mundaka Upanishad here. It says, with the intellect sharpened by thoughts of reality alone, release the arrow of mind and penetrate the mark, the imperishable Brahman. Danur grahitva Upanishadam mahastram, sharam hupasanashita sandhyayita. Vayamya tad bhavakatena cetasa, laksham tadevaksharam somya vidhi. Nectar-like wisdom, somya vidhi. So this is what it means. Sharpen the intellect like an arrow, fasten it to the bow of the mind, and you sharpen it with thoughts on reality alone. You don't let any other kind of thought get in there. You shut the gate. Just focus on that alone and sharpen your intellect. Then release and penetrate the mark, the imperishable Brahman. So, like that story of the archers, you see. And Ram being one of the greatest archers, so he's a young boy standing there. Teacher goes along. You see, all the archers are standing at the edge of the river pointing at a fish, you see. He asks the first archer, what are you looking at? The body of the fish. He asks the next archer, what are you looking at? The eye of the fish. He asks Ram, what are you looking at? My arrow's already in the fish. So that's non-duality. That's the truth of the matter, that you're seeking something you already are. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the musk deer runs through the woods looking for the source of that scent on the winds. But it's in its own navel. See? So that's, again, the kind of predicament of human soul, looking for that which it already is, and amongst those things of its own projection. Everything always to be brought full cycle back into the great self, as the Upanishad said. Final quote at the bottom. There is a greater accumulation of God in man than in other creatures. God is born as man for the purpose of sporting as man. He is called Narayan. Rama, Krishna, and Chaitanya were examples of this. By meditating on the divine incarnation of God, one meditates on God itself. If God can manifest through the image, then why not through mankind? Everyone's bowing before images so much, you see, but here's the living God, Swamiji said. Turn to the living God, worship that, because you're just God walking around on two legs. So image worship should lead you to a certain place, you see. I wasn't going to go to it so soon, but there's an example of how it would lead one. The 3 kinds of worship, they call them. Three kinds of shuddhis, they're called. Shuddhi means purity. Drovya Shuddhi, Kriya Shuddhi, and Chit Shuddhi. And we can put them straight across with the 3 kinds of devotion, which is called Bhakti in Sanskrit, Vaidhi, Raga, and Prema. At Drovya Shuddhi, it means purity of location and atmosphere. So some of you early on in SRV said, I really like the shrine in your ashrams. Can I have one of those in my house? Yeah, that's the point. I'll even come and bless it for you if you put it together. Try and put it together in a place that's separate from everything else. And it's probably not that good in your bedroom, or some people put it in a closet, or whatever the case may be. But if you had enough space then, or a partition of some kind, you try and keep it in a place where only God exists there, like sharpening the arrow with thoughts on reality alone. See? So that when I go there, I feel holy and everything else gets shuts away. Like Yanashri's beautiful reading this morning in the Gospel. Try and shut away everything when you go on retreat. Try and go away from your father, your mother, your husband, your wife, your children, and definitely your cell phones. You turn them off when you go in the movies, right? But you leave them at home when you go on retreat. Because they're dreaming, you're dreaming too. See? So you're kind of dreaming, you have to wake up in a different way. You're not just a mechanical object, you're a very subtle mind complex. Many, many thousands of nerves running through the whole complex. Not just gross nerves that science tells you about, but subtle nerves inside of those nerves that take you to deep sleep and dreaming, and that cause all these exquisite thoughts to come up in the mind of the seers. That's prana again. So you must purify your location and atmosphere. Have some place in your house where you can go when all of these dualities and all of these calamities even begin to visit your life. Everyone goes through them. So that's Drovya Shuddhi. They've known about it for a long time. Sri Ramakrishna says, repeating the name of God a fixed number of times, fasting, making pilgrimage, worship with offerings, doing sacrifices, by continuing on in this path for a time, and one gradually attains Raga Bhakti. So you have to start off with this place. You see behind this whole outlay here is an altar. There's a picture of Master, Mother, and Swamiji, and plants, and here's all the articles, the bell, and the water pot, and the kosha, and various things, all polished very well, so that when you offer them to the divine, who exists in the article and who is beyond the article both, and is also in your own heart, then you have a sense of purity and divinity, shuddhi. So at the level of Drovya Shuddhi or Vaidhi Bhakti, you're practicing performance of puja and arati, you're chanting the names of the Lord, and you're receiving of mantra diksha. That all goes together with purification. When I went to my teacher, Swami Sheshananda, in my early 30s, he said, he gave me the mantra and he said, "This purifies your body." And I was shocked. I thought the mantra was like much higher than that. But there can be people who are very intellectual, as we say, but they haven't had their bodies purified yet, so they can't go with holy company. As soon as I got the mantra, that's when I met Karmapa, Kala Rinpoche, Dalai Lama, and Sheikh Musafir Effendi, and other great seers. All of a sudden, it was like a subtle barrier had been removed because I got the mantra. I was now a devotee of the Lord, and I could pass where I couldn't pass before. So the purification of the body doesn't just mean I'm washing and scrubbing it. You see in the shower 3 times a day with some sort of obsession with cleanliness. It means that all of your bodies have become pure. You have a gross body, and you have a subtle body, which is your mind, and you have a causal body, which is your deep sleep state. And you have senses and elements in each one of those, five of each. So all of that becomes pure when you get the mantra. So when he says, "This purifies your body," well, you're not supposed to consider yourself only a body, right? So why should you consider yourself, when he says body, why should you think he's talking about only your physical body? He's talking about your 3 bodies, your 3 worlds, the 3 mantras of Om, the threefold breathing process, the Trinity, those 3, all of those gets purified. So the mantra is at once very foundational and very primal, and at the same time very celestial, spiritual, universal, and so forth. So that's an important part of this first stage of Shuddhi, purification, or Bhakti. Now if you graduate up from that, because I was going to save this for this part of the sloka, which said that one supreme divinity can be intuited by a pure and devout mind. So we jump to it, but it's a good time to bring it forth. When you go up to Kriya Shuddhi, that means purity of act and deed, because Kriya is like your breath, Kriya is like your act, Kriya is like that which happens spontaneously. There are at least 5 different meanings for the word Kriya, and the one we're sort of settling on right now is this one that happens around spontaneous action, like you're going to worship, or you're going to school, or you're going somewhere. So act and deed have to be purified, and that will only happen if you've purified the location. In fact, if you purify the location, you can take that location with you everywhere and project it over wherever you're going, even an impure place. You could walk in a bar and consider it pure. I've never tried that because I've never been in a bar. Not once in my life. But I suppose it could be possible. I wouldn't say that you should try it, or try it at home, kids. You should stay away from those things. We were just studying the 10 Buddhist tenets on retreat. One of them is do not touch, do not think of, do not sell, and stay away from all alcohol. Absolutely 100%. So we're talking about, I'm just a social drinker. See, or I only take a drink once in a while. See, no, you should never even think of this stuff. You have a natural state of consciousness that's getting unsettled by that. And it happens over lifetimes. And so you're born with that desire to go seek drinking. See, like a camel is born with a desire to eat thorny bushes. Why do you think there's so many camels being born? From camels, because they want to find those thorny bushes that their parents know about. So what should we pass on to our kids? Social drinking, the example of being a social drinker only and not a alcoholic, or should we pass on to them this free state of mind that always exists at all time, and that simply, if you take a little bit of a journey inward, you will find inside of yourself. Just a matter of spending a little time in it. So purity of act and deed, very, very important. And the characteristics that you'll see, you begin offering prayer and offering charity to those in need. Like I said, you begin thinking of others and their suffering and their predicament and try and lift them out of it. You also observe austerities. When you get to that level, that's sadhana. In fact, Sri Krishna says in the Gita, Arjuna asks him, what is the austerity of the body? Is it fasting? And Krishna says, no, austerity of the body is worship. You get together, you polish the articles, you create the location, you sit down, you bow with your head to the ground, and you sit there as the flowers are being offered. That's the hardest thing for the body to do. Probably the only thing harder is to meditate, isn't it? So to sit and empty my mind of thoughts, that's going to be hard, you see. So I need to grow by levels of austerity. Yes, fasting has its own efficacy at some level. But Sri Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, yoga is not for one who eats too little or eats too much. It is not for one who sleeps too little or sleeps too much. So you find these great teachers of the middle path, Krishna, Buddha, Sri Sharda, our own mother, teach this way of moderation in which one can slip through the chinks of the net of Maya and be free. Go up the middle. There's a great halfback or fullback in football that used to just go up the middle all the time. They just cause a riff for him and he'd take off. Joe Theismann. I think, if you're watching, Joe, good going. Now apply it to spiritual life. Go up the middle. Yes, I watched a little football myself in my 20s. I didn't go in a bar, and I never drank during a game. Never drank at all, but there was a certain appeal to those games. Spiritual appeal for me. Sacrifice of selfless service. Now there's a very high sacrifice that you can undergo. Selfless service to others. That's karma yoga. Or what Krishna says in the Gita again, you have the right to the work but not to the fruits. So you do the work as if it were something that you had to do very, very carefully and meticulously. But then after the work's done, you stand back and let the effects fall as they may. Good or bad effects or mixed effects will come back. You dam up a river so your kids can have a swimming hole. Downstream, they're dying of thirst. Don't have any water. So apparently good act turns bad. So you go into a country, you raid it, you desecrate it, you kill people, you take it over and turn it into a vacation land. But that's a bad act, right? But all the Tibetans went to other countries and started spreading Buddhism. That's good, isn't it? So a good act turns bad, a bad act turns good. That's why you shouldn't have any hands-on with it. You just do the work to the best of your ability and let the Lord or the Mother of the Universe take care of the rest. And stand back and be attached from the outcome too. The shock value leaves you. And you just say, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You lose your job, mm-hmm. Get the lottery, mm-hmm. No difference. Now, the final level of that, and coming up on our break, is chit shuddhi. That's the hardest to attain. Pure mind is it. Such is said by Buddha and by Ramakrishna both, that 2,500 years apart, Buddha mind, that is, pure mind is Buddha mind, or Ramakrishna said in Bengali, pure mind is God. So you're talking about no mind, or destroying the mind, or other ways in which they put it. Pure mind is the ultimate goal. It's as if everything turns empty. There's nothing in the mind anymore. It's just like pure light. The void illuminating mind, the Buddhists call it. It's empty, but it's not empty of essence. It's empty of everything that troubles you, that bothers you, that pleases you too. And so you are in that one state of non-duality all the time, as we found Swami Sheshananda when we went to him, our teacher. Just one state of mind all the time makes everything very simple, not a bunch of choices, good or bad, positive or negative, with profound or negative effects. Just very simple. One state of consciousness, zip, that's it. Chit shuddhi is pure mind then, and the quote here is, "One cannot realize God without prema bhakti. When one has such love, one does not get attracted to maya of wife, children, relatives, and friends. One retains only compassion for them." So next time your friend comes up who's attached to you, you say, "Yes, I love you, but what's troubling you? Can I help you?" They'll say, "What's wrong with you? We're supposed to be cutting it up here and getting into trouble. We're supposed to be suffering and crying on each other's shoulders. All of a sudden you have compassion for me? I'm going to unfriend you." So they put that together with prema bhakti, and we jumped the gun a little bit here. They put kriya shuddhi together with raga bhakti, which is bringing that worship you did at the altar out into the world and making the world your altar. The quote there was, "Vaidhi bhakti," this purity of location and atmosphere, is like a moving fan that creates a breeze. But the fan is set aside when the south wind blows by itself. This is like raga bhakti, wherein one feels love and attachment to God naturally. But first you had to engender some love for God by making an altar and getting that lower level of bhakti going. But then that was like, fanning yourself. But then the south breeze suddenly blows through the window, and you go over there and get the natural rush of air, and you feel cool. And that's like raga bhakti. Everything becomes natural now to you because you've created the precedent for love to grow in your heart, both in location and in atmosphere and in act and deed. Those go by stages. Location first, then the atmosphere you create, then the deed or the act that you engage in out in the world. And of course then purity of mind could also be synonymous with what they call colorless karma. There's black karma, negative, there's white karma, good, and then there's this combination called gray. See, that's the worst, really. We can recognize good and bad, but we can't recognize mixed very well. That's going to take discrimination. Spiritual discrimination, which is what he named himself after. Swami Vivekananda, the bliss of discrimination. So to separate the mixed karma is going to be a task, but you're not going to have to worry about it once you've done it and accomplished it successfully, because now you have colorless karma, and you're going out and acting without acting. There's no residue, like a bird flying through the sky and leaving no trace, or a fish going through the waters and leaving no trace. So Roshi walking across rice paper and not leaving a wrinkle, you see. So that's the way you live in life. In fact, that was our Swami's name, Swami Asheshanandaji Maharaj. That one interpretation of that is Ashesha, no residue after the creation is over, after life is over. You've lived in such a way that you don't have any ill effects following you around, nor do you have any good effects following you around that will call you back to heaven, where your ancestors are having a good time. See? You're beyond good and bad times. And you're beyond time, in fact. And you're just living in one state of enlightenment, and then beings are coming to you, you're not going to them. Now, how much time we have before the break is maybe 10 minutes, so we can look at this nice little teaching down here that I just added as an addendum. It's about food and water and purity there. Vashishta, whom we studied so much yesterday, says, the scriptures state that if one does not eat for 10 days, he becomes a non-seer, a non-thinker, a non-hearer, a non-doer, and a non-knower. And so the great statement comes, anehidam sarvam pratistam. All here is supported by food. Life force, mukhya prana, that's healthy prana, nourished by the ingestion of pure food, supports the organs and maintains the life in the body. There's again why one does not fast too much, cannot practice yoga if one fasts too much. Food is at the foundation of everything. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnal, Brahmanahutam is what you've memorized, right? So that ends in Brahma Karma Samadhina. Those who see Brahman have their karmas destroyed and reach Samadhi, Brahma Karma Samadhina. So that food is a very profound basis for everything, and one needs to regulate it well in order to get this mukhya prana. But don't just become a healthy animal or a healthy body. Use mukhya prana to bring it up the spine. Bring that energy up the spine. How does one do that? By sadhana, by meditation, by study of scripture, by serving all beings as God, and by doing your puja and your arti. Attending upon holy company, those things bring that energy higher up the spine. Otherwise they just stay at that third level or third chakra, and you're in for a ride with your ancestors for a few more lifetimes. Because you're going in and out of this chakra all the time. Digestion of food, water, fetus, formation of fetus, that's all there at the third chakra. And there are nerves leaving that and coming back into it. Not just physical nerves, but subtle nerves by which the soul exits and enters. But here's a novel idea. Why don't you exit out of this center? Or this center? Or this center? Here there's no exiting and entering. So it's beyond movement, you see. Coming and going is all nonsense, Vivekananda said. So he goes out of this center and comes into this center. Avatar comes into this center. So why not raise your consciousness so that you're always thinking of God with love, you're always speaking of God, you have visions of God. And then when you pass, you can exit out of these centers inside, not out towards the vibrating particle, but inwards toward the kingdoms of heaven within you. Visit some of those chambers in God's mansion, and practically possibly do that before you die in meditation. Become aware of the cosmic level of things, see, that a practitioner needs to become by doing sadhana, and then you're well prepared for the eventuality of death, or the illusion of death. Because remember, Ramprasad sings, I have received an order from the Divine Mother of the Universe that death must die. Therefore, I put death in its own grave. Take that, death. Now, to follow this further, here's ingested food. The coarse part of it turns into feces. The middling part of it turns into flesh. And the subtle part of it turns into mind. Beautiful teaching in Lord Vashishta's work. Ingested water, the gross part turns into urine. This middling part turns into blood. And the subtle part turns into breath. Taste and water, right? Your yogic connection. Energy from food, the coarse part turns to bone, the middling part turns to marrow, and the subtle part turns to speech. So you can see then how we get from pure blood, we get from pure food we get pure blood, and from pure blood we get pure mind, and from pure mind we get pure thought, and from pure thought we get chitshuddhi. See? We get no mind, or we get highest mind, or non-dual mind. So food, very important then in our tradition. The final quote here, in ancient days, my Lord, the heroic lad Svetaketu placed his attention on the subject and fasted for 15 days. After this experiment, he became faint and weak, and he accepted the testament of the scripture and his father's statements on the role of food in spiritual life. So too much fasting, not a good idea. Using it in moderation, much better, but taking the energy you get from food and bringing it up the subtle spine, that's best of all, and that will lead you from good to best to better, or from bad to good to best to better, if you haven't started out on the premise that your food is sacred. We go to restaurants now, we were just saying this the other day, we met with a Mormon person in a restaurant, you see, and we say, what do you think about food and so forth, and so the food came and she said, do you bless your food? I said, certainly, right here in the restaurant we do it every time. So people sitting around and we just did our blessing, see. Humanity needs to see that, the fast food generation. Those who are not thinking that food is any great import, and it's just, my nephew wrote to me recently, if you're watching, Adam, namaste. My nephew wrote to me and said, these people that I'm with on this land are rich. They have much land and much food, and they gather food in great feasts every night, and they sit and they just start eating it. And he said, it disgusts me. They don't offer it. There's no offering to anything. Not even a word of gratitude. Not that that's really important, but to make an offering of food before you eat it, Holy Mother said, if you don't offer food, you're eating poison. And it'll turn to poison in your bloodstream. That's why people get sick and so forth. But you can purify food by blessing it with the mantra. A prayer is okay, but mantra gets more to the source. Prayers say, oh, thank you, God, thank you, God. But Sri Ramakrishna used to say, does a man give birth to a son and then expect the neighbors to raise him? You don't need to thank God. That's all provided for you by nature. God really had nothing to do with it. Thank nature if you're going to thank anyone. And where does nature come from? In my own mind. So thank yourself for your own food. Because it all came out of you. Air, earth, fire, water, ether are thoughts in your mind. And better of all then, for the real purifying effect, say a mantra over it. Brahmarpanam, God is the food. Brahmahavir, God is the taker of the food. Brahman is the act of offering the food. Brahman is the articles on which the food is placed. Brahman is the nourishing power in the food. Mukhya prana. Be aware that all is food, all is Brahman. Then your karmas will be destroyed and you'll reach samadhi. No impediments in the way in your health, either physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, philosophically, psychologically, or spiritually. So now we're going to retire for our break and have some food and water. Let's see how it affects us after the break. Thank you for listening. We have returned to the second half of our final class in Portland, Oregon in this springtime session. And we've been studying, trying to wrap up that 5th chapter of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. This is how a sloka gets unwrapped, at least in my way of thinking, that you might have to present 4 or 5 visuals in order to really convey the depth of what's there. Remember, that sloka is that supreme divinity who created both life and matter, who is the source of all arts and sciences, who can be intuited by a pure and devoted mind, realizing that one, the blissful, the incorporeal, and the nameless, one is freed from further embodiment. It suggests to us that embodiment is not the ideal or the highest ideal, and possibly why Vedanta and Buddhism, yoga and so forth have been criticized as being pessimistic, like we should be life-fulfilling, not life-negating. But what it really is worldly life-negating. You see, if you remain in just the intellectual frame of reference, my teacher used to say, then you never know the soul, which is beyond the intellect. So to come to know that divine being that you are, as the Tantra says, you are the darling of your own worship. So to be the darling of your own worship would be to, as we were showing here, go ahead and run the obstacle course of purification and reach sadhana, and then use the Dharma, and then reach a realized state of mind, a pure mind. After that, it doesn't matter if you're born again or not, because you're not actually being born. You're just taking on a body, sloughing it off as a snake does to its skin every once in a while, or as children take on new clothes after they outgrow old ones, Krishna says in the Gita. So that's the idea of the unborn. The unborn has actually 2 aspects to it. Unborn has 2 aspects to it. One, videha mukti, I'm gone and gone forever. I have no hope for me, for the world, evermore. I've lived one life. I've seen what's here. I'm done with it. I'm gone. And will disappear like a hailstone in an ocean. And then the second aspect of that is jivan mukti, or what the Buddhists call bodhisattva. I will come back again and be born in pure knowledge, not with any ignorance left. And those also are unborn. Or as Vivekananda put it, I may find it very freeing to get out of my body, but I will never stop working. I will take 1,000 births if I can help just one person get out of the illusion of Maya and suffering. So some of them take a great vow like that. That's more the Jivan Mukta, in his case the Nitya Siddha, an eternally perfect soul. Very hard to talk those into coming back to earth, though. There are songs in our tradition that Sri Ramakrishna became a golden child in one of these higher realms and approached this hoary seer who was sitting there for 700 years without moving in meditation. That means like an age. Every 5 to 700 years these souls come back again. And so the young baby, Sri Ramakrishna as the young beautiful child, had to waken up that seer out of non-dual samadhi and tell him, I'm going down there. You see, down there where the ark of the world is sinking in lust and greed. Will you come with me? So there are several songs that my teacher's teacher, Swami Shardananda, one of the direct disciples of Ramakrishna, composed. So that gives us a sort of idea of what's happening in these inner realms, especially at a very high level. Well, the soul still has to course through Maya and turn Maya into knowledge and turn knowledge into existence and knowledge and bliss. That is Sat Chidananda. So that's what this chart shows us, that I showed you early on. And I think it's Vedanta 113, so it is the newest chart so far composed in the Vedanta category. These charts fall into Vedanta, Samkhya, Yoga Vishishta, Buddhism, Tantra, and Gita. 6 different categories, which are 6 different darshans in India. There's more, but Vedanta has the most in it, 113 charts now. And this shows the progress towards freedom that we were talking about, that is intimated here in this final sloka, as the soul can be intuited by a pure and devoted mind who raises himself out of these levels. So these two charts are a good coupling together. For charts like this, you have to start at the bottom and proceed up, which is rather a misnomer, because you are already that pure eternal spirit, yet you, depending on how far away you've fallen from knowledge of that, is the problem. And in yoga they say 5 hells. The first one is ignorance. That means of your true self. The second one means ego sickness. Zen would call that zembyo. Emotionalism, sensationalism, and depression, and all the things that come from it. And so one needs to work their way up and out of that. And then attachment and aversion are the third and fourth hells. That means duality, really. Not just attachment and aversion, but pleasure, pain, virtue, vice, remembrance and forgetfulness, as we were saying, all the way up to form and formlessness, which is a very high duality to think about. Am I with form? Am I formless? Am I both? Am I neither? See, you have to go in and look at yourself and see what your true essence really is. And also maybe contemplate bondage and liberation. Sometimes I feel free. Sometimes I feel bound. See? And sometimes I don't know whether I'm free or bound. So, form and formlessness, bondage and freedom, two great dualities, but these ones that you're pondering, pleasure and pain and so forth, those are, you should get over those, as they say. Get over it. And start putting your mind, making your eyes single. You know, your eyes two, and then make your eyes single, you shall know the truth. So, try and reach for, inside for that non-dual station, that where your true soul is abiding. Like the two birds in the Upanishadic metaphor, right? One is on the top of the branch in the sunshine, top of the tree, and the other's on flitting around from lower branches, eating sweet fruit and rotten fruit, and turns and gets sick, and then feels better and gets sick, and bird vomits, and then, finally flies up and just rests with this bird in the sun, regal like itself. So that ego self is really a caricature, or even a reflection of its true self, and it needs to join in oneness with that. So this chart then starts there at that ego sickness called Bhranti, or delusion. Now you can see that that's connected with ignorance. That is that first hell, ignorance, or avidya. Avidya means ignorance of your true self. Ignorance about what? About the vital energy that courses through you. That would be the first thing yoga wants you to get a hold of, is prana. And that's how a person who has fallen from their higher status proceeds. A person who is already at a higher status is using the prana to get into the body consciously, so he's already mastered the prana. They don't have to do asana, they don't have to do pranayama, they don't have to do pratyahara, they don't have to do austerities. If they do those things in front of you, they're as an example to you that you should do them. Like Krishna's saying in the Gita, I've already attained everything, but if I don't come back here and work like everyone else, then people will get the wrong idea. They'll think they can give up work. But work leads to knowledge, or it should lead to knowledge. And then knowledge leads to truth. So you can't give up obligatory work until such time as that it has given you knowledge. Now, if you're doing work in the wrong way, like we were saying here, in an impure way, the different impure shuddhis or lower shuddhis, then those works are causing bad karma, and you're caught in a cycle around. The minute you start doing acts and deeds in knowledge, that's when the karma starts to unwind. Like a spool winds on black, white, and red thread, right? That's the mind doing actions negatively and indeterminately and mixed, winding on those karmas, and then when it takes refuge in God, that starts to spin the opposite way, and the thread comes off the same way it went on. It's Holy Mother's analogy about the mind and karma. So, taking refuge in God, however you call it, taking the initiation, or taking hand, or refuge in Buddha, however you would call it, in the particular path you select, is of supreme importance to purify the body, as we said, and get on with the path. So you're ignorant about your vital energy. You should probably get in touch with that, the prana. You're ignorant about the meaning of scriptures and words. You're ignorant about selfishness, selflessness. That is the opposite of selfishness. How to be selfless. Higher intelligence escapes you, and the soul might as well not exist to you. So this is called tamas. See how dark it is? As in the rather black, gray to white color scheme we have here. Tamas means darkness. Let darkness go. The will of the wisp, which leads with blinking light to pile more gloom on gloom. This thirst for life, that is worldly life, forever quench. Because why? You didn't hear that in there, but it drags from birth to death, and death to birth to soul. They conquer all who conquer self. So you need to get on top of these preliminaries or these requisites to conquering the self and utilize them to your highest advantage. Otherwise, Bhranti, delusion, is the problem. And it's attended by spriha, desire, and lokaya tika, materialism. Sound familiar? Desire and materialism. The West is following the Bhoga Marga, as my teacher used to say. Bhoga Marga means path of pleasure. It needs to follow the Jnana Marga, path of knowledge. And it has to be higher than worldly or intelligent knowledge. Because as we can see by our most intelligent ones here in the West, the savants and scientists, that they're trying to convince us that you can make a utopian society here. Your medicine, your science, your objects, your dalliance with nature, or you're trying to dominate over nature, is not working. In fact, poisons are coming out of that instead of nectars. Or you might say both are coming out of it in turns. But the overall effect is this insidious poison that threatens to undermine the very foundation upon which you're standing, the earth in this case. So in that way, then, we need to get over this materialism, and that's why I put here selflessness. If you become more aware of how to be selfless, then you're going to be treating your food with reverence, you're going to be treating nature with reverence, just like a puja, right? And just like your different kinds of shuddhi. You're going to treat other people with reverence, knowing God dwells in all things. So very important to adopt and adapt. Is adopt this great non-dual truth and these axioms, and then adapt slowly, raise yourself up, which is what this chart is proposing. So tandra, darkness, sleepiness, or ignorance is there. These are what are going to help you get out of it, and this is pretty much the realm you're in with it. The quote here, little one sentence koans I put, let each one work out his or her own freedom. In other words, God is not going to help you, the devil's not going to impede you, those are all in your mind. There's only the great self. Call that God if you will, but even the seers are kind of careful about giving it a name, you might have noticed. So let each one work out their own salvation, and let that salvation lead to liberation. The brain is different than the mind, and liberation is different than salvation. We need to make those healthy distinctions so that we're not caught and trapped in those people who believe in a brain which just dies at the end of life. And those who believe in relativity, in their science they're speaking relativity, the relativity this, relativity that, and not one mention of reality. Like Time magazine, when I was about 19, see the issue there, God is dead. I looked inside at the staff, see, not one seer, not one saint, not one realized soul on the staff. Who are they to pronounce God dead? They don't know anything about God. So you have to go to the seers if you want to know what's in the realm of the kingdoms of heaven within you. They know. You go to a doctor if you're sick, you go to a lawyer if you have a court case. You shouldn't go to a guru if you want to know about spiritual life? Is that fair? Or is it just that you just don't believe in God or spiritual life? You just believe in materialism? You're up a creek without a paddle, my friend. And you have a death grasp on air. You're trying to grasp atomic particles that change at a billionth of a second. You should probably face off with one of those atomic particles and say, get a life. Because it lives all of a billionth of a second. That's not much of a life. So you're going to have to go inside and see where the source of these things came from. The ultimate source would be the Word, according to Christ, and according to the ancient rishis. Let's go up a step then. There is bandha, or bondage, relating to pleasure-seeking. It's the realm of sense objects, pleasure, excitement, family pastimes, feelings, and brooding. That's tamorajas. That's that zembyo, or Zen sickness. That's your ancestors. That's that world being a pit and your family being vipers inside of it. Good vipers and bad vipers, but they're still vipers. That is, this is the round of ancestors that Lord Buddha wanted to get out of and get free of so that he could come back and help them all later. As Vivekananda, one of my favorite sayings of his, said, God save them all, but save me from them. That might as well have been Buddha's mantra when he went deep inside. I will save them all, but I'm not going to get sucked into their mess, you see. So you must go away from family, go away from friends, go away from everything, go into the forest, go near the stream, go near the waterfall, sit next to the ocean, go into the forest, go to the mountain, go to the Himalayas, go to Mayavati, and meditate there in silence, away from everything. Up there where you cannot get a signal. Where you need to go.
No bars.
No bars, yeah. Of either kind. And then just see what happens when you sit in that kind of silence and that kind of emptiness. It might be painful at first. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you know, you can take a worm out of filth and put it in white rice and it'll die. See? So bring back the filth. See? Why did you do this to me? See? So that's really much the soul taking itself and putting it in pure atmosphere. Chitshuddhi. You know, it's trying to get this new atmosphere. Trying to run on jet airline fuel instead of diesel. You know, it has to burn a higher fuel. It has to acclimatize. So adapt and adopt. Go from good to best to better. So that's this idea about excitement, family pastimes, feelings, and broodings. Look what it's connected with. Aupadika, sense enjoyment. And vikshepa, distraction. Distraction is a big one. There are 5 kinds of minds, right? Scattered, dull, sometimes focused, sometimes distracted, balanced, and no mind. The first sine wave is like that. You see, scattered. Dull is like this. Vikshepa is like this. Peaks and valleys. That's like a fly lighting on sweet sometimes and filth at other times. Can't decide. See? Then ekagra is a flat line. You have died. You see, the Zen Roshi says, you go ask him, he says, have you died on your zafu yet? See, have you died yet? You died before you die. Has your ego committed suicide finally? See, destroyed itself, and you've seen your true self behind it. And then finding the root is like a line with a space, line with a space, line with a space. Your mind is actually falling out of everything. It's really experiencing no mind. And it comes back to the branch of a tree, and it soars high. Then it comes back to the branch of the tree and soars high, like we saw Sri Ramakrishna doing all the time. The man was a copious map of samadhis, some which had never even been written down in the scriptures. The scholars and the pundits were all confused at some of the samadhis he had had. Well, I don't see those listed in my book. Kamana, pleasure seeking then, with sense enjoyment and distraction. You need to get over that habit and focus. If you watch TV, watch it like this. See? I go to teach, we have to say, I give credence to the Catholics. They're the only ones who will let me teach yoga to their children. Everyone else, I'm the devil, you see. No, you cannot come into the school and teach. That's the devil's work. So going to a few Catholic schools, you see, and then there's everyone, like 6, 7, 8-year-olds gathered there in a big room. And I said, in my tradition called yoga, we connect slumping with ignorance. And they all sit up straight. Because nobody wants to be ignorant. Of course, 5 minutes later, they're like this again. So I have them sing, and that gets them like this again. You sing, Om Jaya Ganapati Ganesha Jaya Om. Oh, we like the elephant-headed god. It's nice. We like that Hindu god. It's one of our favorites. So we sing about Ganapati and so forth. So, asana, whatever you do, breathe, sit. Don't give up yoga just because you're having some pastime there. Being with family, be with them as a yogi or yogini. Show them how to live. The quote there at that level of Tamorajas is, advancement towards liberation is freedom, the worthiest gain of mankind. So there is only one purpose to life, and that is being free, living free, knowing what freedom is. First thing I ever heard about Sri Ramakrishna was his words in a little book. Turning pages, there's a picture of Ramakrishna, and I still remember it to this day. A man is born to no purpose who, having been given the boon of a human body, is unable to realize God in this lifetime. Personally, I like that very much. So put it right on the line for me. So, no purpose in this life except to realize God. Sometimes it takes people a long time to realize that. They have to go through every back alleyway and wrong turn and misdirection, get back on the freeway. See, there's anger alley and there's lust lane, and we have a chart on it. Prevarication place. Confusion circle. They're all coming back to me now. Let's go to the next level. You may go forward. But in this game, you never pass go and collect $200. You reach the end of all movement, and you just retire into yourself and stay there forever. Rajas. Good old Rajas is next. Red. Really, that should be red. If it were color scheme, black, brown, red, pink, white. And then pure sattva, colorless beyond that, as Shankara has added to the scheme. At Rajas, well, it's mrisa, pretense and vanity. I see people hear about the truths and then they want to pretend like they know them. And all of a sudden everyone's an authority. You see, like they say, there are many, many teachers around but no good students. So that's deception, kapata. Deception. You're deceiving yourself. And udasinha, indifference, is on one side, and emotionalism, vedana moha, or that zembyo idea in Buddhism, is on the other side. It's pretense around what? False attainment, assumed status, feigned authority, and the sense of superiority over others. The same Atman is in everyone, in quantity and in quality. And it's in everything also, in quantity and quality. The only difference is the degree to which that Atman manifests itself through any given vehicle. Not very, very well through a rock, a little better through a leaf, a little better through a lake, and best of all through a mirror, is that reflection of light in everything. So you have to realize that everything is reflecting according to its sheath, or its upadi, or its vehicle, or its body. But it's still the same light. It's just being tempered or sublated or conditioned or superimposed over, or apparently affected. But that one reality stays the same. So that is Rajas and its problem with false attainment. To rise out of that, the quote there, those social rules that stand in the way of freedom are injurious, and they must be done away with, Vivekananda said. These are all Swamiji's quotes. Must be done away with. Anything that gets in the way, that's contraction, that's death. He says anything that moves forward and expands, he wants that. And that includes social rules and regulations. Those also has to be modified when spiritual life is on the horizon for that striving soul. The next level is Raja Sattva. That is, you can see how the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, are playing through everything. Inertia, activity, and balance, they call it scientifically. And you can see how those are in the universe. They're also in nature, and they're also in the mind. Mostly the gunas in the mind is what we are most concerned with. We can look at a stream and see that it became a swamp, and that's tamas. You see, we look at the same stream and see that it's rushing over rocks, and that's rajas. The same stream in a high mountain setting is just peaceful. It's like a mountain lake. That's sattva. So all those gunas are in nature. They're also in the universe as inertia and as that which is static, that which is moving, planets through space and so forth, or solar systems. But also then we look at these same three gunas in the mind and we see the problems and the benefits of them. And there's where that mantra, it's not my fault, comes in handy, because you realize that nature is playing the gunas on you. And it's not happening to your soul, it's happening to in nature. All activity takes place in nature, not in the soul. The soul is inactive, it's static, free all the time. So where is your consciousness going to be placed, in the soul or in nature, is kind of the point. The next step up then is Chaitanya, spiritual awakening. We had it over here too. That's why you can sort of follow the correlations of these steps with these steps. And this puts it more in terms of information that sort of pinpoints the problem and lets you reflect on it. Chaitanya means consciousness. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Chaitanya ho, may your awareness be awakened. And he would put his hand on you or put his hand towards you, give you some kind of diksha, and you would awaken. Ushering what? It ushers glimmerings of insight. It ushers in your intuitive wisdom. It ushers in your aspiration, your desire to rise. And your willingness to be a participant in your own spiritual awakening. And positivity, too. Gets rid of the negative thoughts, klistavrittis, vibrations in your mind, and replaces them with positive thoughts, aklistavrittis, as the father of yoga has told us. Well, that's going to be very much aligned with sadhana, or self-effort. This is, you've been going from delusion to pleasure-seeking to deception about your own status. I'm all right, you're all right kind of nonsense. And nothing's ever all right in Maya. And then up to deep thinking, you see, self-effort, sadhana. And that's accompanied by alochana. You're starting to think deeply instead of just seek pleasure or get distracted or have desires. And you're starting to gain perception, upalabdhi, instead of indifference, sense enjoyment, materialism. So the whole thing shifts, a very profound shift here from pure rajas to rajasattva, where a little light is starting to get into your mind. And you're getting this insight, intuition, aspiration. It takes a long time to wake up from that sleep. You've been in it for many lifetimes, possibly. Or even in this lifetime, you left in a fairly fetal condition last lifetime, but you were born in a society that was very rajasic. Sound familiar? Krishna says in the Gita, those beings will be born in tamasic wombs who are tamasic, that is, slothful and inert and lazy. But those who are rajasic will be born with active beings, active souls, rajasic society. And then those who leave the body in sattva, balance, will be born with sattvic parents. So like attracts like very truly in that manner. So we can use this as sort of a gauge and a guide, a gauge to find out where we are amongst the guna scale, and then find out what to do to lift ourselves to a higher level. And a deep thinking would be one of the early signs that you're beginning to consider things. Before you were brooding, see, oh, woe is me. See, your mantra was, why me, why me? See? But then your mantra later becomes, who am I, who am I? You shift from why and what and where and when to who. Sounding like an owl all of a sudden, as you ask yourself the really important questions. Chitta Chinta, Chinta Bhati, and Chitta Lochana. That's a teaching we used to have in SRV. You remember that? Chitta Chinta is brooding thought. Chitta is thought. And then Chitta Lochana is thinking. Brooding turns to thinking. And then Chitta Bhati, Bhati means light. From thinking you get the right insights and light starts pouring down. Light leaping through the nerves, as Aurobindo writes in one of his great poems. That's Rajasattva. In other words, you've left behind Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and you've left behind Mr. Thomas's neighborhood too. And now you're going to Mrs. Sattva's neighborhood, you might say. The quote there, may you speedily attain to freedom, and then help others attain it too. Oh, that's the ideal of separating yourself away, going to the forest. Krishna called it love of lonely study, and taking some time away, like Ramakrishna's reading in the Gospel this morning, where by Gyanashri here is saying that how long should you spend away? I would say the householder should take at least a day, but of course a day several times a year. So in SRV, like our Zen retreat recently, 3.5 full days of immersing yourself in Zen Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, which are basically the same thing, from Jan in India to Chan in China to Zen in Japan. 52 generations of living, illumined souls have gone by. Am I supposed to ignore that? I should wake up. Woodcutter immediately recognizes he's a diamond cutter, and he has been all along. Beautiful Zen koans about that. Bright blue river rushing in a circle. See, that's this line of successions of Buddhas that have come to you, all the way down to recent times. Same wind blowing for 1,000 miles. Same wind blowing for 1,000 miles. One prana in 5 forms. One transmission in different breaths or gusts. So anytime you take up a koan, there are some 1,000 of them in the tradition, then those brief little statements like mantras have this profound effect on the mind, and it can start engaging in deep thinking, alochana. Now we come to sattva. You can see we're heading towards a dancing bhakti in bliss. And at the level of sattva, you have the desire to be free. Sattva is not freedom yet, it's balance. But from balance, you can create a springboard that vaults you into freedom, from which you will never depart again. The ever-free, never-bound soul. Like I said, of 2 varieties, basically. The Videha Mukti, who gives up all forms, and the Jivan Mukta, who comes back again. In freedom, though, never in ignorance. So, Mumukshutvam, you might recognize it as the 4th treasure, or 4th jewel of the 4 treasures, right? The first being viveka, discrimination between the real and the unreal. The second, detachment, vairagya. When you know what's unreal, detach from it. That's coming full circle, isn't it? That's following through. The lack of follow-through is very telling and very damaging to your spiritual life. And then finally you have Shat Sampatti, the third treasure, is 6 jewels full. Samo, Dhammo, Upuiti, Tutiksha, Uparati, Samadhana, and faith, Shraddha. So you have inner peace, self-control, forbearance of all ills. That's where you would leave that kind of mind that's sometimes distracted, sometimes balanced. And then you have this further evolution of everything, that ekagra mind and that no mind, if you put it in yoga. So you're talking about forbearance leading to contentment, and contentment leading to the ability to concentrate on God and nothing else. There are different kinds of concentration, but this is a very singular and unique kind of concentration that allows you to sit and take up the exact non-dual state that you were in your past meditation and return to it immediately and just take up your meditation in that same level. That's a master. But a past master never left that position. In fact, when he stood up from his zafu, and went out into the world, he was still in meditation. So when he returned to his pillow, he was still in meditation. It's all meditation to him, like Swami Sheshananda, when we saw him. One state of mind all the time. So mumukshutvam is the fourth of those. After all of those things are accomplished, then you have faith, shraddha, and from faith, which is rock solid and undoubting, free of ignorance and free of fear, then you come to this steady position called, I have a true desire for freedom now. It's not the kind of freedom where I want to be free today and tomorrow I go back to the world and enjoy. See, I didn't really learn that the world is not my oyster, that the world is really unable to fulfill me. Everything in it, people, nature, objects, pleasures, unable to fulfill me. That fulfillment is only in me, and I lend it to other things. So you've taken the cart before the horse and you put everything in the right position. Everything boring becomes interesting. Brooding never happens to you. The hardest tasks become a matter of simplicity. You can go everywhere, do anything. That's how Ramakrishna told about Swami Vivekananda. He can go to the West, he can eat meat with the Christians, he can do anything, nothing will hurt him. Mumukshutvan, the desire to be free, is a very rare thing then. It's the one real pure desire. It's the one real valid desire. And it's very hard to attain. Sometimes it comes and goes. Like Sri Ramakrishna told a story. A man said to his family, "Oh, I'm going to Benares to renounce the world. I'm going to become a monk." So he had rightly determined at that stage of life, he thought. So he went to Benares, and a couple of days later they get a letter, "I found a great job here in Benares." So it wasn't really a true desire for freedom. He still had this desire to earn and make money and work. Desire for the world. If you can do it dharmically, don't get us wrong. If you can do it dharmically, then it's a matter of service, right? You're serving God and human beings. You're raising children as God, not raising children as somebody who you want to take care of you when you're old, or some strange selfish way, you see, of raising children, or earning money. It all has just to be done dharmically. But if you're a monk, then you pretty much put it all away, and it shouldn't be taken back. That's why Dalai Lama will not raise a finger to fight against the Red Chinese. And some of his monks differ in him and say, we should go fight against them. That's an evil. And he said, no, we're monks. We've taken a vow. We can't go back on our vow. Let them kill me. I'm birthless and deathless. I'm Buddha nature. Tibet is eternal. It's in the mind as the eternal land. I go there every time I die. I go to my Tibetan brothers and brother monks, you see, sister nuns. That's the real world. This is illusory out here. You might have noticed this changes all the time. But this is the eternal unchanging that my soul is posited in. So I've, shifted all my eggs to that basket. Put all my ducks in a row and their eggs. So what is it involving the true desire to be free? Recognition of oneness, discrimination, detachment, and the willingness to practice. So you're still at a sadhana level there. You're still wanting to hone and refine your wisdom to the point of a goad so that it can penetrate through those last vestiges of the curtain of nescience, like ego, that first time that you decided to divide yourself from the whole and created a separate ego. That's why you ask, who am I? Am I that ego or am I the whole? Am I the wave or am I the ocean? Am I the hailstone or am I the sea it falls into? And you can see this kind of thinking, sattva, mumukshutum, is aligned with prasana, clarity of mind. You finally, with deep thinking, alochana, and perception, got clarity of mind. It's highly valued. Steady wisdom, Krishna calls it in the Gita. Upekshanam, equanimity, the Buddhists call it, highly valued by all seers and saints in all religious traditions. Clarity of mind in yoga is khyati. And it results, the father of yoga says, in the rain cloud of virtues, dharma, mega samadhi. It's a kind of samadhi of its own, penultimate to non-dual samadhis, nonetheless, but still, where all the divine qualities come out of you, come out of hiding. They weren't something you ever had to seek, something that are always in you, and they begin to surface like a rain cloud of virtues. The whole landscape gets well watered with virtue, with higher virtues. And that is the first real attainment, adhigama. See, that's the higher attainment they're talking about when you get clarity of mind. I mean, think about it. Anything you try for that's colored with rajas and sattvas on down is going to be colored. It's going to come back to you in the form of something modified, an admixture. It's not really pure. But if you can reach this higher level and start doing all your actions in sattva and all your thoughts in sattva, then you can get clarity of mind, a true desire to be free, and some real attainment under your belt. It's also then in accordance with nishkampana, stability. That's that kind of stability that Shiva has, that will never waver, in thick and in thin. Everything that comes at one can be taken from that stable possibility, that stable potential. And finally, the whole thing will then samasti chitta, end in universal mind. You see all truths in all the religions. There's no such thing as a foreign religion to you. All religion is indigenous to your soul. So you start thinking of it that way and start pulling the wisdom out of all the traditions and pooling them into one universal sanatana dharma, one eternal path, one eternal truth. And you see all beings headed along it at different stages. You can help them. The quotes here at these two levels are, there must be freedom of the individual to express his nature. There must be freedom of the individual to express his true nature. So sattva will be a freeing influence that gives you balance and equanimity, and from there you can get a springboard into ananda, or bliss. That's unalloyed, that's uninterrupted, as the stotrams of India call it. It's not good and bad, coming and going. or mind changing any kind of station or set of awareness. It's more like Tailadarajan, oil being poured from one beaker into another without splashing in a perfect arc. See, just perfect concentration, which you learned back here in this one-pointedness, you see. Deep thinking and making it all one-pointed. Pretty soon that becomes so perfected that your whole consciousness is just being poured into Brahman. And that pouring is blissful, like that hailstone falling in an ocean. Thank you for going through this chart in this period of time. Shows how a soul moves from lower truth to higher truth. Asato ma sadgamoya, tamaso ma jyotirgamoya, from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, as Vivekananda said. They used to translate that, moves from falsehood to truth. And he said, no, soul moves from lower truth to higher truth. If you examine some of this level of tundra, you can see it's nectar, because it has poisons there, but every center has poison and nectar both. The nectar in darkness is the impetus to get out of it. They desire to be free of suffering, to be free of darkness. And light will be more shimmering, more glistening to you when you're in darkness. There's a beautiful song. Mother's light shines in deepest, densest darkness. Therefore, the yogis meditate in a dark mountain cave. And then they experience that ananda, you see, which goes something like that. Prema mudita manase kaho Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram. Prema mudita manase kaho Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram, Shri Rama Rama Ram. Papa kate dukkha mite lete Ramanam, Bhava samudra sukha dhanava eka Ramanam. Papa kate dukkha mite lete Ramanam, Bhava samudra sukha dhanava eka Ramanam, eka Ramanam. Shri Rama Rama Ram, 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 Shri Rama Rama Ram. So prema mudita, that joy, that love. We had a prema, remember, was that highest level of bhakti, prema bhakti, that goes together with the pure mind. So that universal mind, samasta chitti, chitti means thoughts, so you have this wide open thinking process that always gathers everything back into it. And you reach that state of oneness. That state of oneness, they also sing about that after they arrive there. Jo kucha hai so tu vihai, tujhse humne dil ko lagaya. Jo kuch hai so tu hai, tujhse humne dil ko lagaya, dil ko lagaya. Ghazal, it's called, classical folk song of India, where they're singing about this innate oneness. I've finally realized, O Lord, that everything exists in Thee. The whole world is nothing but Thee. I and Thou are one being. So that's why he's dancing, you see. He's singing. So he's realized this oneness, and now he wants to celebrate it. So he does so by expressing truth, by dancing and singing the Lord's name, and by meditating to get deeper and deeper into his true essence. So that chart, brought to you by the saints and seers of India, so that you too may join them in this great ecstasy. What a conflagration of ecstasy. A great puja is being enjoyed all the time. The flowering tree outside is a puja, so the holy man was sitting under it, outside the temple, and the man came out and said, "Why aren't you in the temple enjoying the puja?" He says, "Because here, great puja is going on right here, under this flowering tree. God is offering flowers to God." So some souls feel that way. I could launch into a couple other teachings, but they will take longer than the 15 minutes we have. So I think I will end here and let you all out early from school. You will appreciate that, I think. And we will head for July with the summer retreat, and then my visit to Portland at the end of July into August. And we will take up, now that we have really definitely finished and unwrapped that final sloka 13 of chapter 5, we will be able to start and mark it in your books on chapter 6, the final chapter of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. It's been a wonderful 2-year excursion with many, many teachings and many, many charts. These scriptures actually help me, as I read them, to create charts as they go along, so they're always growing in these ideas taking form, as they should also in your life, not just on paper. So we want to realize God who exists beyond Quran, beyond Bible, beyond Gita, beyond Upanishads, but we must use the Quran, Bible, and Gita and Upanishads to find it. As Vivekananda said, that's true religion with a capital R, and doesn't put one in the position of we find ourselves in with giving up or turning our backs on religion. That's religion with a small r. So in that way I leave you with these teachings of the Dharma, precious, and for all lovers of Dharma, may you take them and go deep inside with them. Like an oyster takes a drop of water or a drop of sand, dives deep and creates a pearl out of all that irritation. All that rubbing. So may the Dharma rub you in the right way. Let's end here with a chant. Om Sato, Om Sato Ma Sadguraya, Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamaya, Mrichur Ma Amritam Gamaya, Abhira Bhira Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshinamukam, Tenamam Pahinicham, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And now we leave the live streaming audience to meet with you again in 2 weeks in Hawaii. Next week we will not have live streaming because we will be on our way home. And so in 2 weeks you may tune in again. And so we bid you aloha, namaste, and then a few announcements for the present Sangha after we depart.